Welcome to another episode of our podcast this week. And this week I'm joined by the lovely Dr. Jennifer Miller-Ray and Madeline Haas. And this week we'll be diving into 3D printing in the educational field. We're going to talk about how 3D printing affects education and how the innovation of technology is reshaping the way students learn in the classroom.
Thank you, Dalen. This is an exciting time because we're here with one of our noise scholars today. So Madeline Haas, we are so grateful that you could be here today. Maddie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Madeline Haas. I'm a third-year student here at Sul Ross. I'm a mathematics major specializing in education, 6 through 12, and I'm really excited to be here. The noise program has opened up so many doors for me, this being one of them, and so I'm very excited.
Maddie, you're just such a brilliant person. Not only that, Maddie's like the president of the math club, right?
That I am.
And so, if you want to do something that get involved here at Sul Ross, and you really want to learn a lot about STEM, is the math club open to all students?
Math club is open to all students. As long as you've got a love for learning, we're happy to take you in.
Awesome. And when do y'all meet?
Look out for your emails. We'll send out an email whenever we have a meeting. So
okay. They're pretty active. So, and I know y'all go on a lot of trips and do a lot of things with Dr. Angie Brown, who's an amazing noise co-PI and math professor here at Sul Ross. We hope to have her here in the podcast room at some point soon. So we're just excited to be here today.
Yes, Madeline has done such a great job. But I have a few questions for you guys. And the first question that I will be asking you is, how is 3D printing transforming the field of education, specifically in STEM subjects?
This is a great question. 3D printing brings an exciting and very disruptive approach to our traditional education setting. It can be a big game changer, in my opinion, as printers are becoming more affordable, they're faster, they're more reliable, easier to maintain, and because of that, access has greatly increased. I think I got my first 3D printer thanks to a NASA multi-skill mission grant. I got some money to get a 3D printer here in Texas in 2011-2012 school year. And we put it in the library, and I really didn't know what to do with it. I thought, well, if we put it in the library, everyone would have access to it. Not realizing kind of the learning curve that kind of can take place there. But man, immediately the students were so engaged and were eager to learn. And because access has now greatly increased over the last 15 years here across the nation and in our state, we have access to these 3D printers in most of our public libraries, school libraries. You can go to your local museum sometimes, and a lot of innovative classroom settings now have 3D printers, making it easier to learn about 3D printing. 3D printing can really engage students to take an interest in STEM who may not otherwise become interested. For instance, I've gotten a lot of girls interested in STEM whenever we were making jewelry one time. That got them interested in learning about engineering design and CAD software. And so that can kind of engage students who may not have otherwise had an interest in math or science. And there's some ways that it is transforming education by rethinking creative spaces. And that's where this idea of literacy comes in, because a lot of these creative spaces are what we call maker spaces, or my friend in Arizona, Tom Thomas, might say maker places. It can happen anywhere. In fact, we actually have a traveling 3D printer that we can bring out, and that enables learners to create all kinds of prototypes, such as pulleys, robotic parts, puzzles, I mentioned jewelry, telescopes, levers, and the list just goes on and on and on. I mean, there's just so many ways that 3D printing is transforming the field of education. And I think it can really transform mathematics. What do you think, Maddie?
Yeah, so I was in maybe 6th or 7th grade when 3D printing really became this big boom in the math and science field. So I remember growing up and getting to play with Tinkercad, and I feel like even those basic CAD softwares are really transforming how we teach STEM, because it allows students this much more hands-on experience. They get to actually sit down and look at even just these basic shapes and think, okay, how would I make that? What equation would I use to make that? How would I find the volume of this thing? Would it be easier for me to make it hollow? If I'm making it hollow, how much material am I going to need? It makes them think about all of those little things that you aren't really thinking about. So instead of finding the entire volume, you're just finding the surface area, or you're finding the volume but only of this much of a sphere. It really makes kids think about everything in a much more hands-on approach, because they're doing it as they're thinking about it.
You know, she's hitting on something really important there.
She is.
Because, you know, knowing how that's applied in the real world. I think that's something that kids, you know, if I see it on a board, that's different than if I'm making something and seeing it like come to being, right? Do you think that makes a big difference with how they engage?
It does. So engagement is centered around specifically your hands-on, your movement, all of that stuff. That's one of the 5 E's is engagement when talking about in education. So focusing on getting them either up and moving or having their hands get busy while they're doing something. Those are like the 2 big things. And so 3D printing, specifically just creating your models, getting them ready to 3D print, that's all hands-on activity. And so it allows those students to keep on going, keep that interest. They don't stop and go, oh, what's this? Or, ooh, what's this? They're focused on what they're doing.
So it seems like the kids would be very excited. It allows them to use their critical thinking skills and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it also prepares them for the long run. So just like Madeline said, if you're starting in 6th, 7th grade, by the time you graduate in high school, you know, you have quote unquote 10 plus years of experience of using Tinkercad and all these type of 3D printers. So I really, really love that. And another question that I have for you guys is, what skills do students gain from learning about and using 3D printers?
You know, it's such a powerful and creative learning tool, in my opinion, that can really help educators inspire innovation and really think about problem solving, as Maddie was saying, and equipping students with future-ready skills and also soft skills. We sometimes don't think about those soft STEM skills that are very much in high demand. You know, we have a natural connection as humans to 3D printing. I think that's why kids are so engaged, is because in the STEM field, we often hear about science and math, but we don't have often a lot of opportunities to engage in engineering in K-12. We're actually using technology to design something in a CAD software setting. So we're we're learning about design aspects and learning through CAD software, but those soft skills of problem solving, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, opportunities to use the hardware, understanding that we have different kinds of filament. When I learned that we could print food out in a 3D printer, that just changed my brain. I was like, wow, look at all these weird things we can print with a 3D printer. It really is a playground where we are allowing and facilitating failure. That can become innovative because, we aren't maybe accustomed to that. And that is how we learn. We learn through failure. And so when we have those times where we facilitate a safe way to fail, and we go back and we continue to try, we continue to redesign, we fix our, design, or maybe maintain the printer, whatever it is that's failing, that's facilitating that trait of persistence in STEM or grit. And, it can also encourage kids to build that persistent skill. And I think that is enabling us to, not only explore, create, But through that persistence, yeah, that can be hard to handle sometimes, but I think at the end of the day, we have a lot of fun. The ability to bring the arts into STEM, to me, that's what 3D printing does. We're using art with STEM by having this prototype. And that opens up the door to so many diverse learners because, we can engage students to, for instance, recreate a fossil. One of the things that we did in 2011, 2012 was we had kids research a historical building in their math class, and they had to scale that building to size in a CAD software. We weren't using Tinkercad, it wasn't around then. We were using another program that works with the Cricut, and we used that to learn how to scale things down. Same principle, same kind of software. And I was amazed at how many of our exceptional students, who don't sometimes thrive, in a traditional education setting. I kind of researched this. I let an exceptional classroom, so these are kids that may have a learning disability, a special need. I had that group have the same assignment, and then we had another group over here who they were in an advanced class. And what I learned was the exceptional students we found were more engaged and had a greater learning growth through this project. And so I think that kind of captures, how that can really kind of wake up the brain to become more engaged and maybe see what things that are available to students who may not have ever thought that they had a career in STEM. Another thing I think is fun to do is for the eclipse, we had different topographic maps that were floating around the nation. And so, creating an eclipse path topographic map might be something, or a molecule, organic structures. I mean, there's so many things you can do. And so when kids are challenged to research a prototype and then to take these concepts in math or science that are often very abstract, and apply it in a real world, like Maddie said, hands-on application, now suddenly that concept has meaning for me. And so now I care more, and I'm making more, I can reflect on that whole idea. And hopefully we have, knowledge transformation through that.
So I feel like one of the major skills that kids really gain when learning with 3D printing is spatial awareness. A lot of kids lack the ability to kind of tell, it's like, okay, what fits in where? How far away am I from this thing? That seems to be a thing that a lot of kids lack, especially in the ever-growing technological world of iPads and tablets and computers. But 3D printing really helps to solidify those basic skills because it allows students to think, okay, I've got a 3D printer that is 1 foot by 1 foot, so how big of a thing can I make? We have this much filament, how large of an object can I make? How am I supposed to make it? It really gets those students and kids thinking about how what their project does fits inside the space and the world around them.
Wow, that is amazing. And I just love what you said about how the traditional student may not be able to function well in a regular classroom, but they may excel in this type of learning to where it's different.
I have seen fully autistic kids who are nonverbal literally start talking because we were using 3D printing. That is a fact. And so it wakes up things, I think, we kind of fixate on something that, we feel successful at. And I think sometimes in traditional classrooms that gets lost because we are often assessing in a way that's not valuing the funds of knowledge that we all have. We all have assets that we bring to the classroom. And so I think 3D printing is just one avenue to maybe help someone who might not feel successful in the traditional math or science classroom who might be at risk to suddenly care and to recognize their potential.
And I think that's the whole goal, that student felt heard, that student felt loved, so they feel comfortable enough to do that because of 3D printing. So obviously 3D printing is bringing a deeper meaning to education than just printing models like we have right there, and that's just amazing. The last question that I have for you guys is, how can educators integrate 3D printing into their existing curriculum effectively?
First I would encourage any educator to start small. Keep it simple. You want to try to locate your school librarian. I would say, they're a resource to you, or your public library, to see if there's a print shop available. You don't have to know how to use the 3D printer to facilitate 3D printing in your classroom. That can be scary for teachers who might have, for instance, we have brand new science standards here in our state, in Texas, this year. So we may not have time, to learn how to use a 3D printer, because it is a learning curve. So I would really encourage you to think about, okay, what resources do I have available? And, is there a print shop available in my community? So maybe I don't have to learn how to maintain the 3D printer, but I can still facilitate maybe this activity. So I kind of would encourage you to start there. That way you don't have to know how to manage or actually, print the 3D products, but you can point your students to the resources that already exist, because what I have found is kids thrive with this. Some kids really want to just go in and use it, and you can learn from your students. It's okay. As a teacher, we are a lifelong learner. We don't stop learning. So it's okay to admit, hey, I don't know everything here. I'm going to try to find it out, but I'm going to get you the resources. So that's the first thing. The main thing is to get your kids excited about the possibility of using a 3D printer, and to know that you don't have to know all the ins and outs, or feel comfortable managing it to facilitate the experience. There are even online places like on Amazon, which I couldn't believe that. You just send it into Amazon, they print it, and they mail it to your house.
Wow, I did not know that.
So you can even have students do that, where they would pay to have their prototypes sent to them. But that being said, educators need to be aware that you'll need to set aside some time to provide a solid introduction to 3D printing in the classroom. And this would include to use the software that Maddie talked about. There is a lot of software out there to create what we call STL files. So STL files are those universal files that can be printed on any 3D printer. And there are two really good programs that educators can use for free to get started on this. The first one Maddie mentioned was Tinkercad. It's been around for, I guess, a long time, years. And they have so many tutorials that are step by step by step. I like to start by just having kids or teachers create a nameplate or a keychain or your initial. You can start really small and then kind of work up from there. So just learning how to, these tutorials are like 3 minutes, minute and a half to 3 minutes. They're not really that lengthy. And, you can also provide those tutorials to your students. Tinkercad is great for, I think, elementary up to, 6th grade. Okay, but once we get into 7th grade, we really want to facilitate career readiness skills so that the students are learning about career and technology in a way that's a little bit more advanced. And so one of the ones that I like to use for the older students is an app called Onshape. Onshape kind of works like Google Docs, where I can create a prototype and I can share that with Maddie and with Dalen, and we can all three work on a project together, right? And that, I think, can help you as a teacher kind of create project-based learning activities, or maybe the 5E model, where kids are working in groups and they're working on a prototype together, but maybe on different components of that prototype. And so those are two really good programs, and both of these programs facilitate the creation of 3D objects that can then be sent to the 3D printer. And we are going to work on having some more podcast series that talk about the how-tos of all those things. So, be looking for that. But one of my favorite resources for teachers specifically is you don't have to design an artifact to print it. So maybe you start there. Maybe you start with an artifact that has already been designed just to introduce students to 3D printing. And so there's a whole website out there called Thingiverse. If you've been around the fabrication world, you probably have come across Thingiverse. Thingiverse has thousands and thousands of STL files that are open source that anyone can go and download and use. One of the ways that I saw it being very effective was, and I think the story's out there on YouTube, it kind of went viral back in 2012, 2013, around that time, where a kid made a prosthetic hand that they gave away for free, and they used the app Thingiverse to do that. And you can go in and download that hand and, customize it. And so it's kind of cool that there's this whole community of makers out there that are not always profiting off of things, but they're giving back to the community, which I think is a wonderful thing. And so you can use that to then print from while you're learning how to design an artifact in CAD with Tinkercad and Onshape. So yes, there's a learning curve. Yeah, it takes some time, but you don't have to know everything to get started or to facilitate this with your students.
So one of my favorite sayings when working with 3D printing is mess around and find out. I've taught quite a few of the younger kids with 3D printing, having them just kind of mess around with the software. And I've learned that kids are one of the most creative generations that we have around right now. And so just letting them mess around, they'll create just about anything you can think of. And that's really where you should start with 3D printing, is just let them mess around with the programming, whether it's you're using Onshape or you're using Tinkercad, whatever is easiest for your classroom at the time. Let them just mess around with it, get themselves familiar with it in their own way, however they find it most efficient. They'll get to be more hands-on with the product. And then afterwards, then you can start giving them, okay, now that you've been able to mess around with whatever you've been doing and you got to figure out how you're supposed to do it, now can you make this based off of the skills that you were already taught by yourself? If you aren't, then here are some tutorials. So if you didn't learn the specific skill, here you are, a little walkthrough of this is kind of what you need to do, and then they can mess around and tweak whatever technique they were just taught to make it adapt to whatever they need.
Mm-hmm.
And, I love that because one of the things, I brought some toys in here, I just grabbed a few, but one of the activities we worked with the science mill on 2 years ago was different windmill designs. So I don't know if you can see these, but we have different kinds of windmill blades, and some are more efficient than others. And so, having students kind of test that out, or to test out their design, and some of them are more durable than others. But, another thing that, just have fun with it. I mean, my dissertation was on 3D printing and spatial awareness, so I think we did was makerspace. But when I was done with that, I made a series of graduation nameplates because it was fun. Keychains. I mean, there's just so many uses. I've seen a lot of clubs sell things at the school, like teaching entrepreneurial type skills, like a keychain. And so there's so many uses, and I just think it's a really exciting thing to do and fun, and I think it also teaches that career skills that are going to be in demand in the future. I mean, when you look around, you talked to Dr. Busby last week. That was such a great program. Taylor, you did a great job with that. And Dr. Busby, thank you. But when we look at, 3D printing in the industry, the industrial technology, construction industry, but we also have 3D printing in the medical industry. I mean, it's in every industry. I mean, you go to the dentist, they probably have a 3D printer in the office. And so it really truly is reshaping all of our lives.
And technology has no limit. Like you just said, those are different type of windmill prototypes. So companies and businesses can use 3D printers to see what's more efficient, what can be used better than others, So technology has no limit.
It really doesn't. It kind of brings in the art part with it. So you have that STEAM or stream that they're reading, the streaming learning, the stream approach to learning.
Yes, ma'am. And it has been a wonderful podcast. I've enjoyed learning about 3D printing in education in STEM fields. It seems like the sky's the limit, and I'm so excited for the future.
It's definitely the limit with teachers like Maddie.
Yes, ma'am.
Maddie's going to be an amazing teacher, and we
will.
Cannot wait to celebrate and visit her classroom because
Yes.
she's going to be a blessing and an innovative teacher.
Yes.
So, Maddie, thank you so much for coming
Thank
and sharing
you.
today.
Thank you. I
Madeline.
appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And she's an amazing North Scholar, and we look forward to having other North Scholars hopefully in the
Yes.
future as well.
She's setting a trend. Thanks.
Thank you.